The Imitation Nation podcast covers all things counterfeit, hosted by Shabir Imber-Safdar of the Partnership for Safe Medicines and Sven Bergman of Venture Global. All statements are their own and not the opinions of their employers. Welcome back, Imitation Nation. I think this is episode 10. Sven, welcome to 10.
I think that is correct. Hi, Shabir. Good seeing you. And as we discussed, we're going to date stamp these things now. So this is May 20th, and we're doing this because things are evolving so rapidly that we want to make sure that when people hear it in a couple of weeks, they're like, that didn't happen. Yes, it did happen on May 20th. So,
well, and congratulations on completing your Police Week Unity ride from New York to Washington, D.C. I had the pleasure of, being in D.C. when you arrived, although I didn't actually watch you arrive. I was in a meeting at the time.
It was actually really cool because we rode into D.C. on Monday. And the route we took is we went down Constitution Avenue. So we went by the Hart Senate building with everybody, and all the staffers were out and waving at us. And so it was myself and nearly 3,000 law enforcement officers and survivor families, all of us biking in, various chapters meeting at RFK Stadium just before we rolled in. And it was a really, really good tour, cool tour. And then the next day, the vigil, which is always, if you haven't been, a very breathtaking and somber event. And no, it was good. I feel it's one of the highlights of my year. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, while you were doing that, ESM was releasing a report, an update to a report we did back in February with George Karavetsos, who's a former head of the FDA's Office of Criminal Investigation. In that report, we found it was our first exposure to a view of what is coming into this country as medical products and the amount of interdiction and inspection that's being done. As you know, I'm a shut up and take my money kind of person when it comes to both inspections of drug manufacturing and border protection work. I keep asking, as you know, our lobbyist, is there a line item for this in the FDA's budget? Because I would like to lobby for it to be tripled or made larger, but it is not the FDA's budget. If you're not an approach nerd, the FDA's budget is one giant number. But what we found was that there was ingredients and finished product in the GLP-1 space, semaglutide, tirzepatide coming into the country, some of it marked for compounding. And that was very disturbing because the places that we were finding that it was coming from are not FDA-inspected manufacturers. They're not FDA-registered facilities, so nothing should go into an American patient's body that came from a non-FDA-registered facility. So we updated the report here and just released it last week. And we're seeing now consistently two kinds of fraud in terms of medical products coming in. The first, of course, is the obvious, is that there's a medical product like a blood thinner, and the manufacturer listed on the manifest is not an FDA-inspected facility. It's not a company registered with the FDA. It's an address. That company does not have an address at the location. It's just really not safe. Either it is legitimately made and it's misdeclared, in which case it should be rejected, because if you can't verify if it's safe, it shouldn't come in, or it's being made someplace where it should never enter the U.S. because no FDA inspector has seen the inside of whatever building that is. That's the first fraud we're seeing. The second is what I would call code fraud. And the epitome of this is that I actually saw a shipment of LSD and mescaline, both of which I believe are Schedule I controlled substances, entered. And the manifest, the deeper manifest that you get out of the ITAX database said that. They were obeyed. They were like, this is LSD and mescaline. But if you looked at the code, the numerical code that said what was in that package, it was antibiotics and antidepressants, right? So they seem to have found a loophole that whatever screening we're doing is based on the code and not the text of the manifest. Because, I keep, every time I look back at our article, I'm like, am I right about this? I keep looking up mescaline. No, it's still a Schedule I drug. No mystery. So that is what we found. And I'm honestly still reeling about the whole thing. It's just stunning to me.
It certainly is stunning. First of all, it's still good news that LSD is still scheduled as a 1, so I think that's a good call. But then, I found the report really fascinating. Like, to your point, when you first flagged it to me, I was like, I had the same reaction you had. We're like, that can't be. And then looking, and I agree with you. I think that the loophole might be that the system only picks up the number, but actually doesn't do an OCR or text crawl to understand the words on the document. So I'm going to start sharing the report with, the law enforcement, trade, DHS context I have to get an understanding and flag it and say, hey, this is what was found. Kind of what's the loophole from context I had already made on the report pre-release. They said, yeah, probably the CBP Targeting Center will be very interested to say, oh, there's some new way folks are finding a way to work around our systems because they have no interest in that. The same, depending on how it comes in, commercial shippers, UPS, DHL, FedEx, have no interest having that stuff on their planes and ships. They have no interest in that. So I think that report is fantastic. I think now that you released it, now that we can share it, I think there'll be a lot of interest from a lot of parties that they want to do something about this. We'll report back on this part, what's happening. And I know that through PSM, you will, I'm sure, report also what's there. But it certainly is, it was very surprising, to say the least, to see LSD on a manifest.
There's more than just that on the report, and I know you know that, but just for everybody who's listening, you can find it on our website at safemedicines.org. I've taken it internally to calling it the Fishy Freight Report, although that's not its official name. But more disturbing than Schedule I controlled substance smuggling is the fact that I'm seeing real therapeutic medicines coming in from declared as manufactured in places that I know cannot be true. About a number of GLP-1 examples that, if you look at the address for manufacturing on the label, one was a hardware store and the other was a Sobeys grocery store in Canada, right? Now, in truth, I think someone just lied and put whatever random address they thought they could on here. But here's the thing. There's no reason for that to enter the U.S. In fact, there's no reason for any inspector to even have to waste time with that in the flood of packages, right? The big problem we talk about is that CDP, HSI, ICE, DEA, FDA, they do yeoman's work in trying to keep this bad stuff out of the country. These packages should never have been left their port to come to the U.S. They should never have added to the haystack that inspectors have to look through to find the bad stuff, right? They should never have added to the work that inspectors have. And if we want to make all of our government operations more efficient, I think that a key part would be to electronically scan these filings and just reject these things and maybe even catch them before they show up in the U.S. I think that should be a big efficiency improvement. As it is, these things came in anyway. The most disturbing thing I will say, besides that, which was quite eye-catching, was that we found Eliquis, which is an anticoagulant, which if you need an anticoagulant, it's because you don't want to have a stroke or a blood clot. Yeah, so they're super important. There was a whole kilogram of it that was imported, which would have been at least 30, if not 50 bottles of product from Colombia. And the declaration of where it was made is just an alley. It looks like a lot of really nice houses, but it's basically an alley. It's barely a 2-lane street in Colombia. And there's no way that is, well, first of all, I checked. That is not an FDA inspected facility, that address, that company. And second of all, somewhere in America, there's people who are taking this blood thinner that should never have been let in. Because if I can see that the address is not an FDA-registered company and facility, then whoever was inspecting or whoever is supposed to be looking through these entries could have seen that. And that was the most disturbing.
Yeah, and I think, to your point, I think that'll be exactly what we want to find out. What are the loopholes we can help close, or the government can help closing? Because to your point, we always talk about the importance of data. Now, the interesting piece here is you had the data. You know it was coming from a spot that not an FDA-registered facility. You knew what was coming in. Now, there might have been a lying on the manifest, but it still was a drug product, right? It was not a scheduled drug product, but still declared as some form of drug product. And to your point, there will be some loopholes that have to get closed where a lot of that stuff should have some have been flagged or triggered for, hey, something is not right here. So yeah, no, thank you for all your hard work on that, and let's see what we can find.
Well, I think the thanks go to the PSM research staff, especially Anna, who is getting very, very good. Just joined our team at looking through these freight shipments and is having the fun part. Tell me some good news. What did you see in the news that was a positive development?
So there is good news, and we always look for the light. So there has been a good development on the legal front, right? When brands battling counterfeits, we've discussed on this pod since the beginning of the year and multiple times, counterfeiting and especially sellers are increasingly utilizing social media to advertise or sell their illegal goods, right? And increasingly, this includes using influencers who then knowingly or unknowingly, and I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt here for unknowingly, promoting these great deals to brands. Yeah, like, oh my God, I have this product and can't believe it's so cheap, la la la. Well, a Florida judge, a district judge, has granted Nike a partial win in a legal battle with a social media influencer and finding that influencer had infringed the sportswear giant's trademarks through selling counterfeit goods. The social media influencer, assumed innocent, even Fox, who posts under the name Sidas and has amassed more than 1 million followers online. He was sued by Nike because he had produced a lot of content that was talking about reps, replicas, fakes, dupes. So I think in his case, there might be more knowingly versus unknowingly what he was doing. And so the judge in her order found that it was undisputed that Fox sold counterfeit Nike goods in connection with the popular mobile phone app Cash App, and that Fox had posted counterfeit Nike shoes for sale. So the trial is ongoing. It is good to see that Nike is making progress on saying to social influencers, which are becoming more and more, no, you can promote that kind of stuff. We'll see where the case goes. We'll see if an actual verdict comes out of it with penalties and takedowns. But this certainly was a well-received development that it just said, no, you cannot do this. You're not protected by free speech. You're clearly selling counterfeit. So that was a nice partial win in the court.
And that's a Lanham Act?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So for people who are not familiar with it, the penalties and sanctions that come from violating the Lanham Act are pretty steep. I've been studying this because the Lanham Act has been used lately in terms of prosecuting counterfeit medicine being moved around the supply chain. And there's not a high standard for knowledge required.
Right.
I'm not sure there's anyone. So the Lanham Act, if you transact business with the counterfeit, you don't get to say, oh, but I bought it from this guy who said it was honest. It's, just strict liability.
Right.
Yeah. And the penalties are high enough that when I talk to pharmacies who may buy from sketchy wholesalers and they ask what the risk is later if that product is found to be a trademark violation, I say it's a business apocalypse, right? You will probably have to shut your business if you get found out. And there's actually a relevant case recently where a pharmacy was in that position and they pointed at their pharmacy liability insurance and said, well, we don't have to pay. Our insurance company is going to pay. And the insurance company took them to court and won the right not to pay.
Yeah, there's something in the terms, I'm sure, about if you violate knowingly.
I'm not sure it was even knowingly, but the insurance company said, look, we are not on the hook for you committing a trademark violation. And the pharmacy's like, no. And the court was like, nope, they are not going to have to pay for your trademark violation mistake. So you don't even have the protection of your insurance policy in this scenario, which I think is a really interesting development, not just in medicine, but for me, it's personally interesting in medicine, but everywhere.
Oh no, in one of my first jobs, I was more in the marketing and advertising world. And one of our big things for any commercial, anything we did We had an entire step in the process where all we did is reviewed materials for, did a trademark happen to sneak into our advertising, right? So the shirt I wear right now, we made sure that whatever this was blurred out, right? Or not there, or edited away, or we got permission to use it. Or if it was something that, for example, if you use something that's very recognizable, like a Zippo lighter, Harley Davidson motorbike, something like that, we made sure that we didn't use something that was clearly recognizable because they also might have used the trade dress. So, absolutely, because they can come down hard on you. There's takedowns, everything. So, no, Lanham Act is, intellectual property is America's competitive advantage globally. So that's why our laws are so very protective on intellectual property, and I'm happy for it. But I'm gonna see what this content creator will have to do when Nike is done with them.
Yeah, so I guess the judge found that they were infringing, and now we're in the rest of the trial. I mean, that's the central fact in the case.
Yeah. So what are you seeing? I know you saw something weird pop up, right?
So I actually I spent a lot of time on Reddit, as all I think men do.
I don't. I must not qualify in your mad definition then. I'm not a Redditor. My wife, ironically, is. I'm not.
And so I like to follow discussions, especially in professional circles, about what people are seeing. So I follow family medicine physicians. I follow lawyers. And I recently discovered that there's a number of logistics and customs brokers subreddits where they talk about their profession. And this one, the tariffs obviously are making these a very lively place of discussion. My favorite was someone who posted, I had a shipment. It came in. I was charged the 145% tariff, and now the tariffs are 30%. Do you think they'll be issuing refunds? And I virtually was doubled over laughing as I read that comment. No, the government is not going to give you back their money because the policy changed. The thing that I found fascinating is watching, because obviously I'm interested in fraud and customs fraud. And we've talked before about the issue of people making products in a country with high tariffs and shipping it to a low tariff location and then lying on the country of origin. And this actually got mentioned. One customs broker said, hey, he posted this thing on Reddit, which I'll link in the show notes. He said, hey, customs broker here. Every customer that has asked us to commit customs fraud has put it in email. So in writing.
Oh.
He continues, today's was the worst so far. One guy had a mixed shipment of China and non-China product, which of course, as you know, has had a very high tariff. The invoice indicated country of origin per line. He asked us to declare everything as the non-China country, so, quote, I can avoid paying the higher duty, end quote. And the broker's final response was, no, you can't. I will not commit a federal crime for you and endanger my license.
Yeah. Well, the custom broker lobby is a very powerful one in DC because decades ago, we tried to increase custom broker penalties for like knowing things. And they have a lot of pieces in there that say, nope, we don't actually know what's in the containers. We're not responsible. We're just shuffling paper from left to right, basically. However, like when somebody directly emails them and says, hey, I'd like to commit the following fraud. Yes, there would be proof that you know of this. So I'm glad that they did the right thing, but that's pretty brazen. To the same about what we see in tariffs. And it's just a lot of folks working stuff around because I don't want to get caught with 135% tariff. So what companies have started to do is rent space at custom bonded warehouse. So for folks that don't know what a custom bonded warehouse is, and actually if you watch Beverly Hills Cop, that's a custom bonded warehouse. And basically it comes into the United States, and in there it is free of customs and it is insured by a bond until it is pulled out of that warehouse. So it sits there, customs and duty free, until I move it out of that warehouse. So if you're a company that has inventory and I have inventory ready to move from China, for example, and I actually want to sell it in the US, but I want to wait out a tariff and see what adjustments will come, I can move it near country. So I move it to a custom bonded warehouse in Canada, in Mexico, even in the United States. And I have it sit in there. And then when the tariff is 30%, I'll move it out. And then the tariff is 150 and I'll keep it in there. And so the information we found is that apparently the demand for custom bonded warehouses has increased sixfold since the declaration of the tariffs. And like, if you don't have custom bonded warehouse space right now in the United States, you most likely won't find it because it's all been sucked up. None of that is illegal. It's just technicality that folks use. But it certainly is interesting. Now, with custom bonded warehouses and free trade zones, there is always concern about what kind of paperwork shuffling happens while they're in there, and then the product shifts before it comes out, and there have been some reports on it. But generally, they pretty much play above board since they're CBP facilities. And yeah, that we saw that move. So that was one of the weird things we've been observing in the tariff drama these days.
What else are you seeing in the tariff-related craziness?
Well, we mentioned it, I think, on last week's pod, and there actually was an article in this Sunday's New York Times Magazine, as well as in other places. There is a concerted social media campaign from young Chinese, good-looking, well-dressed, well-spoken Chinese influencers. It was also, New York Times reported, most likely done with the approval of the Chinese Communist Party, since nothing is created on social media platforms in China without somebody saying, yes, you can post this, where well-dressed young Chinese will say, oh, I work in this factory and look at the beautiful products we produce. And they're just like brand name, brand name, brand name. But, now with the tariffs, we can't produce them anymore, but it's the exact same product. So go to this link and just buy it here. And it's basically brazen advertisements of either counterfeit or kind of, dupe without or super fake kind of thing without the logo on it. And it is a concerted marketing campaign that is coming out of China saying, no, all these brands that you now pay so much for because of tariffs are produced in this beautiful Chinese factory and just buy them here. And I found it interesting because first I saw it pop up here and there. And then if you look at Sunday's New York Times Magazine, it literally was the first story in that magazine detailing it, what is all going on there. So it certainly has gotten crazy when you have social media campaigns advertising, oh no, these counterfeits, you can buy them here because it's actually the genuine. It's stupid. And there's not a lot of legal, like the Lanham Act won't hold because it's China, it's online, it's really hard to take down.
Yeah.
It's happening.
Well, there's a couple things that we don't have a lot of time to talk about that I wanted to hit, though. I had a couple. I know you had one. First thing I want to do is just give a shout out to our friends at the International Anti-Counterfeiting Coalition. They have pulled together what they call the IACC Marketplace Advisory Council. And I saw a picture of it, and the room and the number of chairs in it are enormous around the world's largest square. But it's basically a coalition forum of the marketplaces, the payment processors, and the brand holders, right? So it's on the marketplace side, it's things like Alibaba, Amazon, DHgate, at eBay, Meta, even Temu is a part of this thing. On the payment processor side, it's all the names you would expect: MasterCard, PayPal, and Visa. And then on the brand holder side, you've got everything from Calvin Klein to Johnson & Johnson to the Motion Picture Association to Merck to Disney. And I saw this announcement about them coming together for this marketplace advisory council, and I thought, hold on, these people are never going to agree on any one way to address these problems. And then I realized, no, the brilliance of bringing these people together is that there are things that they probably could work out that will work out faster and better as a result of them being there. They're not going to always agree, but on the things that they agree on, actually, it will be easier to get agreement and get progress made. And if you look at how industries are regulated, this is a step where the marginal actors get pushed out, right? The actors who just refuse to obey the law, et cetera, get sort of marginalized in a situation like this. And so this is a really great development, in my opinion. And while I don't think they have anything to show for it yet, apart from the announcement, which is in and of itself pretty challenging, I'm looking forward to the IACC and our mutual friend Travis Johnson over there who we've worked with for years about what they can accomplish. I think it's going to be exciting.
No, I agree. And it builds on the programs they have. They have Roadblock, they have ICC Market Safe, they have ICC Amazon programs. So I have these individual programs with payment providers and then some with websites and some with Alibaba. So this kind of puts all of that into one basket, which is great. To your point, nothing to show for yet, but certainly promising. I wish them the best of luck.
What did you see?
What did I see? The one thing that I found, and this kind of ends it on a light and funny note for me. There was an article that reported that supplements in North Korea they're finding a lot of Chinese counterfeit supplements. So they counterfeit the North Korean genuine supplements. But the problem is that those counterfeit supplements get better customer reviews than the actual genuine supplements. So apparently the North Korean supplements are not good at all. And so people prefer the Chinese counterfeit, which I just thought was really, really funny. Not an endorsement of counterfeit at all. It's obviously awful that people counterfeit things. But I just thought that was very funny that apparently the North Korean supplement market, not shockingly though, is not that good. And the Chinese counterfeit supplements better. So just on a light note here.
Well, I will do one passing final quick hit. The Digital Citizens Alliance and the Coalition for a Safer Web did a report about illegal sales and advice, medical advice around Ozempic and weight loss on TikTok. This is not surprising to me. I don't understand why so many people treat TikTok. It's an authoritative source, but don't get your buying advice for prescription medications from TikTok, and don't get your medical advice from TikTok. That seems like an obvious statement.
Yes. And if brands are advertised where the price is too good to be true, they're most likely counterfeit as well. So just, enjoy TikTok for the dances, but don't buy those kind of things there. Agreed.
Don't let it radicalize you into hating on pasteurized milk.
And so a little teaser for next week. I'm just going to leave it as a teaser. One of our favorite federal task forces seems to be at the threat of being defunded, but we'll cover that next week.
And I will just end my fake forever stamp drama with I actually turned in my fake forever stamp. So the post office, at the instruction of the postmaster who gave me and sent me an email, some random person in the postmaster's office, the inspector general's office, sent me a note, told me where to take them and what to say. And I put them in an envelope with a nice note thanking them for their hard work in protecting Americans and asking them to bust these guys to Kingdom Come.
Well, I'm glad you admitted to your crimes.
And yours.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you for making me a unindicted co-conspirator. Anyways, on this note, Shabir, do you want to read us out?
Yep. The Imitation Nation podcast is a production of Cause Stories and is the sole owner of this production. Podcast production by Shabir Imber-Safdar. Podcast management by Sarah Imber-Safdar. Theme music written by Jonathan Boyle.